What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Before we get any further into 2023, I first wanted to talk about my most anticipated movies of the year. We got a lot of interesting projects on the horizon already, between some big blockbusters, franchise sequels, indie darlings, and the latest films from many of my favorite filmmakers. So let's discuss. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your most anticipated movies of 2023 are. As always, this is just my list and not a definitive ranking. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie related content on a near daily basis. Now, before we go any further, if you follow me for the last few years, you'll know the criteria for which I base these most anticipated lists on. Simply put, I'm only looking at movies that currently have a set release date. Anything that is only speculated to get released in 2023, something that's aiming to be released this year just with no date, or even something that was announced as getting released in a specific time frame of the year, like something that was, say, announced for fall 2023, I don't include those. Reason being, I just try to keep these lists from being filled with so many movies that wind up just getting continuously pushed back because they were only speculated to be released during the year. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. There are at least 2 movies on here that I had on last year's list but then got pushed back. But if I made these lists based on everything that was only rumored or speculated to be released in a year, this might have been filled with even more of those sort of films. But I do want to give special shoutouts to projects like Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar from Wes Anderson, Air Jordan from Ben Affleck, Ferrari from Michael Mann, Challengers from Luca Guadagnino, and How Do You Live, which sees Hayao Miyazaki come out of retirement. All movies that were announced to get released in 2023 with no release date, all movies that I'm sure will most likely get released this year. I'm really excited for all of them, but they're not locked in for specific dates right now, so I'm just keeping the attention focused on movies that are locked in for 2023. I have 20 movies to talk about, and my most anticipated movies of 2023 are, in release order, Infinity Pool, the latest from Brandon Cronenberg that sees a couple played by Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth take a vacation on a resort and be exposed to the violent and surreal horrors within. I really enjoyed Cronenberg's last movie, Possessor, especially for the way it perfectly emulates the bonkers, surreal style of his father David, a style that I very much enjoy, while still offering something fresh. And it looks like he's keeping with that style for this movie. The trailers do a good job at perfectly setting the mood while not fully telling us what's to come beyond the initial premise. I do think it's going to be wild though, and I'm especially even more excited given who our 2 leads are. Alexander Skarsgård was great in The Northman last year, while Mia Goth gave one of 2022's best performances as the titular character in Pearl. They both handle extreme genre material really well, and combined with Cronenberg's bizarre style, we're going to be in for something else when this hits theaters January 27th. Knock at the Cabin, the latest from M. Night Shyamalan, and given how I found Shyamalan's output to be so wildly hit and miss, and I've only loved so many of his films with his last couple of movies not completely working for me, I am a little shocked to be sitting here saying that I'm actually really excited for this one. It looks really solid. I think what helps too is that this time, Shyamalan has strong source material to work off of, that being The Cabin at the End of the World, which I've not read, but I've heard is really good. And it has a chilling premise within this contained, isolated space of a cabin in the woods that can lead to a lot of great cat and mouse anxiety-inducing thrills. So I'd like to see where this takes things, knowing nothing about the story. On top of that, I'm actually really excited with Dave Bautista in the lead role, who, despite doing a fantastic job at comedy in the Marvel movies, can also effectively pull off chilling dramatic roles like in his brief appearance in Spectre, or Dune, or Blade Runner 2049. So I'm looking forward to seeing him take the lead with a performance in that same vein. I think we're in for what's possibly going to be Shyamalan's best work in some time, and it hits theaters February 3rd. Magic Mike's Last Dance, which is another one I'm a little surprised to put on here because I wasn't exactly head over heels over the first movie, though to be clear, I liked it. And as of this recording, I have yet to actually see the second movie. But I mean, this just looks like so much fun. Like, the trailers put front and center that this is meant to be just an all-out good time, and given who's involved, I think that will 100% be the case. Steven Soderbergh returns behind the camera for this after not directing the second movie, and what I've appreciated about him is the fact that he can go from these really weird, experimental, against-the-grain, low-budget indie thrillers that are borderline inaccessible, and then he just puts out something like this. And he'll have just as much success in both extremes. He's not tied down to one specific style. And I very much enjoyed fun Soderbergh in the past, like Ocean's 11 and The Informant. So there's already a strong foundation right there. Plus, Channing Tatum to me is at his absolute best when he takes on roles where he doesn't take himself all too seriously, like the Jump Street movies or even The Lost City from last year. And with his performance here looking like something in that vein, I think it's going to be a winning combination when it hits theaters February 10th. Cocaine Bear, which immediately gets a spot on here due to the title and premise alone. And the trailer really does look like a good bit of fun, and it's absolutely wild to find out that this is actually based on true events, because this looks and sounds as silly and over the top as it can get. And even with it being based on true events, I don't think it's going to be anything that looks to take itself seriously. It doesn't look like it's going to try giving this story any deeper meaning or anything like that. It just wants us to have a bunch of messed up laughs showing this bear going on this violent rampage, while we see some familiar faces like Kerry Russell, O'Shea Jackson Jr., and the late Ray Liotta in one of his final roles going up against it. I think this is going to go down as a big cult favorite. I'm really looking forward to it, and it hits theaters February 24th. Scream 6, which sees our surviving characters from Scream 5 head to New York City, only to be chased by, surprise, a brand new Ghostface. I very much enjoyed the Scream franchise as a whole, and I especially enjoyed 5, which I found to offer some fresh new ideas, with meta commentary on reboots and toxic fandoms, while also giving us some great new characters to follow after 4 movies mostly focused on Sidney, Gale, and Dewey. And with the team known as Radio Silence back behind the camera, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they'll do with these characters next and what the next big meta commentary is going to be, which has been a staple of this franchise as a whole. We haven't gotten any hints in the trailer, so I'm looking forward to being surprised. Plus, the New York setting is going to give this an even fresher dynamic than what we've previously seen, moving completely away from anything small town or confined space related. Because New York City is unlike any other city out there. There's a lot you can do with this setting, and it'll make the cat and mouse aspects really intriguing. This also looks like we might be in for one of the more brutal Ghostface killers, considering we got a sequence in the trailer showing him using a gun and his mention of how he's not like any other Ghostface. With 5 easing us back into familiar territory while still feeling fresh, this looks like it's going to be all uncharted waters for our returning characters. So I'm excited to see what this entails when it hits theaters March 10th. Shazam! Fury of the Gods, the next installment in the DCEU, soon to be known as the DCU, and I know a lot of people are deflated these days with this cinematic universe, given that James Gunn will soon be rebooting everything within the next year or so, and we're probably going to be moving away from most versions of the characters we've been following for the last decade or so. But just because these movies aren't going to connect to some earth-shattering event, or this might be, though not officially confirmed, one of the last times we'll see these characters in this iteration, it doesn't mean we still can't have fun. You can still think of these adventures as fun, standalone stories, which is what just as many people want from superhero movies these days anyway, how they don't want to watch 30 different movies and shows, part of multiple franchises, in order to watch the newest installment in the cinematic universe. So I'm just viewing this as standalone superhero fun, and considering I had an absolute blast with the first Shazam, which I think is one of the hands down best installments in the DCEU, it's nice to see what looks like this offering essentially more of the same, just with some added characters to change up some of the dynamics. So can't go wrong with that, and I'm sure we'll be in for a good time when this hits theaters March 17th. 65 from Scott Beck and Brian Woods, the writers of A Quiet Place, which sees Adam Driver stranded on Earth 65 million years ago, fighting dinosaurs. And again, this is just one that immediately has me hooked based on the premise and the team behind it. Obviously, I love The Quiet Place, and I also liked Haunt, the previous directorial effort by Beck and Woods, and while I don't think this is going to be anything quite on the same level in terms of writing or anything like that, this just looks like it's going to be an absolute blast. And it looks like something that doesn't want you to take it too seriously. And having Adam Driver in the lead especially has me all the more excited, because he's someone who 110% commits no matter what sort of movie he's in, whether it be a more prestige film like his work in Noah Baumbach's movies, or in something that might require a more comedic or campier performance like in House of Gucci or The Dead Don't Die. And we also don't get to see him take on too many performances in blockbusters. Really, the Star Wars sequels have been the only times we've seen him in one of those movies. So I think it'll be an absolute blast to see him give another hugely committed performance in a blockbuster that has something as silly of a premise as this. So I'm excited to see how it all turns out when it hits theaters March 17th. John Wick Chapter 4, which sees some of Wick's old friends turn to foes as he uncovers the path to face off against the High Table. I absolutely love the John Wick movies. This is one of my favorite franchises of the last few years, and every entry so far has been nothing short of great. Now, the setup at this point kind of have a touch of that more of the same feel, but it's a variation of a formula that's more than successful, and it's constantly boosted by some top-notch fight choreography that feels fresh and original with each film. And this looks like it'll be another entry in that same vein, with the entire creative team that's been handling this franchise back again, which is more than enough reason to have me excited for this. It's sure to be another memorable action thriller and one of the better genre experiences of the year when it hits theaters March 24th. The Super Mario Bros. Movie, which got bumped back from an initial release date in late 2022. Now, I had this on my most anticipated movies of the list last year, though now that we've gotten some trailers in that time, my anticipation for this has shifted from just skeptical curiosity to more legitimate excitement. I'm still on the fence on Chris Pratt being the voice of Mario. I'm still not fully convinced that he's the right fit for this role, but everything else about this looks like something to look forward to. The animation looks absolutely gorgeous, with so much attention to detail to the Mushroom Kingdom and the rest of Mario's world. And the voice talent of everyone else involved, besides Pratt, does seem spot on. Jack Black as Bowser in particular seems like he's going to be the highlight of everyone here, where he'll play Bowser in such a giddy, scene-showing way. I don't think it'll wind up being one of the absolute best movies of the year or anything, if I had to be honest, but I think it definitely shows a lot more promise than what people gave it credit for a year ago. We'll find out, though, when it hits theaters April 7th. Renfield, which stars Nicholas Hoult as the title character, who finds a new lease on life, but also has to rid himself of his boss Dracula, played by the one and only Nicolas Cage. The fact that Cage is Dracula and this is a horror comedy is enough for me to be excited for this, especially as Cage has been on a roll the last few years, picking some bonkers roles in both indie horror and more mainstream efforts, with this falling into the latter category. I'm especially looking forward to this since it's directed by Chris McKay, who also directed the Lego Batman movie, which I absolutely loved. Now, I wasn't as big of a fan of his last film, The Tomorrow War, which was a more serious effort that felt a bit generic, but this looks like it'll see him more in his comfort zone. Again, it's just another goofy movie that doesn't look like it's going to take itself too seriously or try to be anything more than a good time. And honestly, I'm okay with that, especially as we need more mainstream comedies that look to be just pure fun. We don't get enough of them anymore, so we'll see how this fares when it hits theaters April 14th. Beau is Afraid, which stars Joaquin Phoenix as the title character in a decade-spanning portrait of self-discovery in a very surrealist fashion. Ari Aster's back for his third feature film with this one, and while I wasn't quite as head over heels for Midsommar as I was Hereditary, I still respect the hell out of his craft, and there was still a lot out of that film that would still make me excited for whatever he'd have next up his sleeve. And with him now teaming up with one of the kings of surrealist weirdo cinema, Joaquin Phoenix, this just seems like a match made in heaven, especially with Aster going for something a bit more comedic than what we're used to from him, which will allow for Phoenix to have a good bit of fun with this role. The film was originally going to be called Disappointment Boulevard, a title that I liked a little better, and word was that Aster's initial vision for this was a 4-hour cut, which the studios pushed back against, with them now settling on 3 hours. So I have a good feeling Aster's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve here. I think we're going to be in for what might be one of the more polarizing experiences of the year, but I'll be excited to discuss when it hits theaters April 21st. Evil Dead Rise, which sees a sisterly reunion gone awry after the discovery of a mysterious book that summons flesh-eating demons. The Evil Dead's another of my favorite horror franchises out there. I absolutely love the first two movies. I thought Army of Darkness is fun, and I even really enjoyed the 2013 reboot. So my enjoyment of the franchise alone puts this high on my radar. But when I saw the trailer drop, my excitement shot through the roof even more. This looks absolutely bone-chilling, and it looks like it'll be one of the most brutal of all the Evil Dead movies. Some of the imagery here looked absolutely twisted. The director, Lee Cronin, I've seen his first film, The Hole in the Ground, and while I didn't love the movie, one thing I could confidently say is that he does know how to effectively set the atmosphere in horror. So it'll be great to see what he can do with a much bigger budget. And the fact this was initially set for a HBO Max release before being moved to theaters because of how well it was doing at test screenings makes this all the more promising. We'll see how it all unfolds though on April 21st. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, based on the famous book of the same name, and it's being brought to us by Kelly Fremont Craig, in her first film behind the camera since one of my favorites from the last few years, The Edge of 17. That was an excellent and hilarious coming-of-age comedy, and one that I think people can find relatable. Now, this looks like a little more on the cutesier side as opposed to the very dark Edge of 17, but it still looks enjoyable. I think she'll still nail the coming-of-age aspects, especially considering Craig also did rewrites on Bumblebee, which is by far the the absolute best and most emotional of all the Transformers movies, so I think she has plenty of magic in her to make for another very enjoyable experience. I think lightning will strike twice for her with this adaptation that hits theaters April 28th. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the final installment with this iteration of the team, and the final film helmed by James Gunn from Marvel, now that he's fully in control of DC Studios. Now, I'm generally not always on the hype train for the MCU. I mean, in general, I do like it. I just did a ranking video of all Phase 4, and I was actually fairly positive about it as a whole. But am I through the roof excited for each and every new release? To be honest, no. I always try to walk in with fairly tempered expectation most of the time, but Guardians 3, I am really looking forward to. Both Guardians movies are two of my favorite MCU productions as a whole. I've generally enjoyed the team dynamic, and it's going to be sad to see this version of the team go, especially as there have been talks from the cast members that the script for this is really emotional, and I know James Gunn always talks about these characters with the utmost care. So I have a feeling that while this will be filled with all the usual Guardians antics, this might possibly turn into one of the saddest of all the Phase 5 movies. There have been rumors that not everyone's making it out alive. I have my money on who I think it's going to be based on several of the interviews that have come out already, but it's going to be really sad. Though either way, whatever happens, I also think it'll be emotionally satisfying at the same time. I think it's going to be the best send-off for this team that we can get, and I'm excited to see how it all unfolds when it hits theaters May 5th. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, another holdover from 2022, where it was initially going to have a Part 1 to its title before renaming Part 2 to Beyond the Spider-Verse. But yeah, Into the Spider-Verse was by far one of the absolute best movies to get released in the last few years as far as I'm concerned. It's also one of the most influential animated movies in some time for its very unique art style that a number of contemporary films have already tried to replicate. And on top of that, it's just a great movie that I feel has the broad appeal for both hardcore superhero fans and those who have a little bit of superhero fatigue. It told a story that was heartfelt and emotional and got to the heart of what makes Spider-Man such an endearing character, while also leaning in fully to some of the more ridiculous elements of the superhero genre in a fun way. So I'm hoping for more of the same here, just on a bigger scale. With it leaning even more into the universe-hopping, countless Spider-Man aspect, I am slightly weary it might lose some of its more heartfelt elements, especially since the multiverse is such a huge thing with superhero movies right now. But I do think that even if it isn't quite on the same level as Into the Spider-Verse, it'll be really close. We'll see when it hits theaters June 2nd. Asteroid City, which is one of two movies from Wes Anderson. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we're supposed to get a second movie from him this year as well, The Wonderful World of Henry Sugar. But like as I mentioned, there isn't a set release date just yet. I'm holding off from including it on this list, but it definitely deserved the shout out. But as far as this, there isn't a trailer or anything for it just yet, but we do know it'll be about students and parents gathering for a huge painting competition, and it will feature all the usual Wes Anderson players while bringing in a few new faces, with the most notable of them being Tom Hanks. So that's exciting. Wes Anderson's one of my favorite directors of all time. I love nearly all his films, and he's someone who, no matter what, as long as I hear he has a new film out, generally goes to the top of my most anticipated list. So there's plenty of borrowed trust at this point, despite not even having one piece of footage. Not much else to say right now, except it gets a limited theatrical release June 16th, before getting a wide release June 23rd. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fifth and final entry in this franchise, which takes place in the 1960s against the backdrop of the space race. Legacy sequels are the in thing right now. Nostalgia's the new trend these days, so of course we're getting this. So while there's some shoddy CGI in the trailer, and there's a lot of suspension of disbelief involved considering Harrison Ford's now 80 years old, I am still excited for this. It still looks like it's going to be a good bit of fun. Plus, it's just going to be nice to see us get a proper send-off to this iconic character, especially after the extremely polarizing Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I'm hoping this will be a more beloved final entry in this franchise than that. This is actually going to be the only film in this franchise not directed by Steven Spielberg, which some might find concerning, but James Mangold takes over as director, and if there's anyone who I'm confident that could do justice to this character, it's him. And I actually find him to be a very underrated director when it comes to some of the more celebrated directors in recent memory. I mean, this is the guy who gave us Logan, which is arguably one of the best comic book movies out there, along with other riveting films like Ford v Ferrari and 3:10 to Yuma. I think Indy's in good hands here. I think it's going to be a great time when it hits theaters June 30th. Barbie, which stars Margot Robbie as the title character, who, after being expelled from Barbie Land for being less than perfect, sets off for the human world to find true happiness. While the announcement of a Barbie movie initially sounded like something that was just an easy cash-in on an IP, this immediately shot up on my radar when it was announced that Greta Gerwig signed on to direct, with her also co-writing the screenplay with Noah Baumbach. So the fact that you have the people behind both Marriage Story and Lady Bird coming to write a Barbie movie with all these other names like Ryan Gosling, Will Ferrell, Michael Cera, Simu Liu, and so many others, that really had me intrigued for what this had to offer. The teaser really only gave us a quick montage worth of footage, besides a very funny 2001 A Space Odyssey parody, but what I can take note of is that it's going to be bright, colorful, flashy, probably very energetic, and given who's involved, I can imagine a lot of it's going to be very clever as well. So I think we're in for a real treat here. If I had to take a best guess of what we're in for, we're probably looking at something akin to a live-action version of the Lego Movie. But we'll know for sure when it hits theaters July 21st. Next Goal Wins, which stars Michael Fassbender as Thomas Rogan, who's tasked with turning the weak American Samoa national football team into an elite squad. Sports movies generally aren't ones that I get overly excited for all the time, as it's never been one of my favorite genres, but when you tell me one's written and directed by Taika Waititi, then you really piqued my interest. Waititi's one of my favorite directors working today. I loved what he did with Thor, even Thor Love and Thunder. I love Jojo Rabbit, What We Do in the Shadows. His sense of humor is 100% on my wavelength, so his movies are always high on my radar. And for those who worry about him struggling to find a balance between more humorous and more sensitive material, especially due to his work on the Thor movies, well, I think something like Jojo Rabbit in particular should alleviate any of those concerns. And I'm sure we're going to get a healthy blend of that here. Maybe just not on nearly as dark of a level as Jojo Rabbit. I'm not expecting him to reinvent the sports genre with this one or anything. I think it's just going to be a good time, but that's all I can ask for. And honestly, I'm just happy this is finally going to see the light of day, considering this was initially supposed to be released in 2021. But whatever we get, I'm excited for it when it hits theaters September 22nd. And finally, Dune Part 2, which sees Paul Atreides seek revenge against those who destroyed his family. I thoroughly enjoyed Denis Villeneuve's Dune. It's not like my new top movie of his, like it is for so many others, but I mean, he took a novel that had a reputation for being unfilmable and gave us an engaging, thrilling experience that felt digestible despite the amount of world building and information that he had to pack in there. And now that a lot of the setup's out of the way, and with the way the movie left things off, it seems like we can mostly just focus on something even more riveting and action-packed here, while still expanding upon this vast, interesting world. In addition to most of the cast from the first movie coming back, what should add even more to the excitement are the additions, which include Florence Pugh, Austin Butler, and Christopher Walken, on top of expanded roles for Javier Bardem and Zendaya, who only appeared very briefly in the first film, though were set up for something much larger here. I've still never read the original Dune book, so I don't fully know what to expect story-wise, but seeing it take on more of a revenge thriller style story for this second act definitely has me arguably even more excited for this than I was for the first movie. Here's to hoping lightning will strike twice when it hits theaters November 3rd. But let me know, what movies in 2023 are you most looking forward to seeing? Is anything I listed here? Was it something I left off? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.